This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Mega merger. Honeywell and Dow Component United Technologies have reportedly held merger talks, potentially creating a colossal company.
Follow the money. With Jeb Bush's departure from the presidential race, will his donors make a big difference for someone else?
Behind the wheel, how the fast-growing ride-sharing company screens potential drivers. All that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report. It's Monday, February the 22nd. Good evening, everybody. I'm Bill Griffith. Hope you had a good weekend. I'm Bill in tonight for Tyler Matheson.
It's great to have you here.
Always good to be here.
I'm Sue Herrera. Well, stocks start the week with a rally, but we begin tonight with a potential blockbuster merger. Aerospace companies Honeywell and Dow Component United Technologies recently held talks about getting together, a combination that would create a behemoth with sales of more than $90 billion. The news was first reported by CNBC and sent shares of United Technologies higher and Honeywell lower. David Faber broke the story and has the details of an on-again, off-again courtship.
United Technologies and Honeywell have had discussions about a deal in the last couple of weeks. Those discussions initiated by Honeywell, which has offered a cash and largely stock deal at a premium to acquire United Technologies. Not the first time the two companies have spoken over the last year. In fact, early last year, United Technologies approached Honeywell about a potential transaction, a merger of equals. Didn't happen in part because of concerns about social issues and because UTX's stock price fell dramatically over the summer. Fast forward, Honeywell then made an offer to acquire UTX in a letter. UTX said no. That was October. And now the latest discussions. A big question mark hanging over this entire potential transaction: antitrust. The two companies provide a lot of what goes into an airplane. And the question is whether antitrust regulators in the U.S. and Europe would oppose a potential deal. That may be the position UTX takes if it decides it no longer wants to continue those discussions. For Nightly Business Report, I'm David Faber.
And reports of that merger, a potential merger, helped stocks extend their gains today, kicking off the week in rally mode once again. Investors cheering a rise in oil prices and stability in China's markets. When all was said and done, the Dow Industrial Average climbed 228 points to close at 16,620. The Nasdaq rose by 66, and the S&P 500 gained 27. By the way, the price of domestic crude oil rose sharply, up 6%, in part on speculation that shale output would decline. And late today, OPEC Secretary General commented on those production freeze talks and described them as a good first step.
Well, despite the rise today, oil prices are near historic lows. And as we've been reporting, many commodity companies are struggling. Well, late today, BHP Billiton slashed its mid-year dividend by 74% to 16 cents a share. The world's largest mining company by market value also reported a big loss and says it expects the commodity price downturn to be prolonged.
To politics now. Following this weekend's results in South Carolina and in Nevada, the race has been reshaped both politically and financially. John Harwood has been following the money and the politics. And John, what do you think? Did South Carolina put Donald Trump on track to be the Republican nominee?
He's in the driver's seat, Bill. He won impressively across the state, every congressional district, all the delegates. He beat Marco Rubio, who finished second, and Ted Cruz, who was just 1,000 votes behind Rubio, by double-digit margins. So it is going to be tough for him to be stopped, but we have seen a shakeout in the race since then. Jeb Bush getting out. We'll see whether that triggers resources or voters to help somebody else get some momentum.
Yeah, what do you think the odds of that are? You know, Bush has left the race. Do his voters or his donors go and back another candidate, such as Trump or elsewhere?
Well, yes, his voters will go back another candidate, Sue, but there weren't that many of his voters. Now, his donors, they are going to scatter. Some already have, some high-profile former ambassadors in George W. Bush, his administration, and others have moved on, but gone to Marco Rubio specifically. You've had other people like Stan Druckenmiller, Ken Langone go to John Kasich. But both of those candidates are so far behind Trump, it's going to be difficult for them to break through. They've got to find states to win. And money means something, but if it meant everything, Jeb Bush wouldn't be out of this race.
Right. Quickly, though, on Nevada, now on the Democratic side, how important were the caucus results there?
significant. Hillary Clinton held off Bernie Sanders' momentum. Now the rates go south. The South Carolina Democratic primaries next week. Southern Super Tuesday states, lots of African American voters who are loyal to Hillary Clinton. It's going to be hard for Bernie Sanders to break through. He's going to give it a shot.
John Harwood in Washington, thanks as always.
All right, Greg Valliere, let's bring him into the discussion tonight. He is Chief Global Strategist with Horizon Investments. Great to see you as always, Greg. Welcome.
Great to see you guys. Hi.
Let's start first of all with Mr. Trump and Wall Street. What do you think Wall Street would make of a possible Trump candidacy or a victory for that matter?
Well, markets hate uncertainty, Sue, and this is the mother of all uncertainties. If Donald Trump were... Four really quick things Wall Street would hate. Number one, he's promised a trade war with China. Number two, he's itching for a fight with Janet Yellen. Number three, his tax and spending proposals would blow a hole in the budget. And number four, he regularly bashes Wall Street. So other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, you know, is there anything that Wall Street could possibly like about this guy? I'd say probably no.
But then you have the Democrats who are no fans of Wall Street to begin with. So if it came down to, for example, Hillary versus Donald Trump, who do you think Wall Street would favor?
I've talked to a lot of professional investors on this, and they're torn. Needless to say, they're not big fans of hers, but they think that a lot of her rhetoric against Wall Street has been for show to impress the Sanders supporters. I think a surprising percentage of people on Wall Street would hold their nose and vote for her.
You know, the economy, though, Greg, how is that going to play in to this whole discussion? Because Mr. Trump has been resonating with parts of America, certainly, but the economy has not necessarily, or the strength of it has not necessarily been resonating with his supporters.
Well, you're right. I think a lot of us in the industry look at an economy that's starting to reaccelerate. There was a great story in Barron's over the weekend about an economy that could be really humming by the second half. But I don't think the average American appreciates that. They still worry about layoffs and foreclosures, things like that. So that will, I think, be an advantage for the Republicans.
It was going to be my question. If the economy does strengthen, who does that favor more in the election, do you think? You think the Republicans?
No, I think her. If it really strengthens and it's perceived as strengthening by the voters, an important point, I think the voters would say, well, maybe she's right. Maybe the Obama administration has made real strides, but she's not there yet in late February. She's not there yet.
Let's talk about the other candidates, if we could, quickly, Greg. Mr. Rubio and Senator Cruz, Senators Rubio and Cruz. What would Wall Street make of the nomination for either of those two gentlemen?
I think Wall Street could certainly live with Rubio. I think that they would view him as fairly moderate. On social issues, he's not. But I think on economic issues, Wall Street would certainly accept Rubio. Cruz, though, is another story. Here's someone who does not like to compromise, boasted when he was in the Senate that he wouldn't compromise, someone who's pledged to go right after the Federal Reserve and maybe curb some of the Fed's authority, someone who's not that in favor of free trade. So I'd say the Cruz agenda could be more troublesome for Wall Street than Marco Rubio.
All right, on that note, Greg, as always, thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Greg Valliere with Horizon Investments.
And from the presidential race to state politics, where New Jersey has now threatened to take over Atlantic City, which has been, of course, struggling for years. But today, the mayor of that city denounced those plans. And as Morgan Brennan reports tonight, he did not mince words.
In response to new legislation proposing a state takeover, Atlantic City officials had some strong language for New Jersey lawmakers.
The final piece of legislation that the state presented to us was far from a partnership. It was much worse. It was absolutely a fascist dictatorship. This is an insult to democracy and to American citizens living in Atlantic City.
The recently introduced bill would give New Jersey vast control over the city's finances, including the right to cancel union contracts, sell city assets and land, and declare bankruptcy. The city's mayor vowing to line up other state lawmakers to introduce a different financial recovery bill. But the clock is ticking. Atlantic City is set to run out of money within 2 months. A spokesperson for Governor Chris Christie dismissing the comments as, quote, nothing more than political posturing, adding that New Jersey taxpayers can no longer be asked to bail out AC when it, quote, continues to tax and spend so irresponsibly. The East Coast one-time gambling mecca has struggled for years as casinos have sprung up in neighboring states and gaming revenue has plunged by more than half over the past decade. For a Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan.
And political drama is also playing out across the Atlantic in the United Kingdom, where just days after reaching a deal with the European Union, Prime Minister David Cameron is facing some tough opposition in his own country from those who want to exit the bloc. Seema Modi has more on the possibility, of a so-called Brexit.
British Prime Minister David Cameron, already facing the defection of 6 cabinet members, came face-to-face with London's Mayor Boris Johnson.
Ask my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, to explain to the House and to the country in exactly what way this deal returns sovereignty over any field of lawmaking to these Houses of Parliament.
This deal brings back some welfare powers. It brings back some immigration powers.
Cameron has 4 months to argue his case. If he can't convince Britain to stay in the European Union, other countries could follow, meaning the mere existence of the EU is in doubt. Johnson is the highest profile politician to back the campaign for Britain's departure.
Because I want a better deal for the people of this country.
Skeptics like Johnson doubt the UK can gain any rights back from the EU. The British have debated the merits of EU membership for years, but tensions are rising as the ongoing migrant crisis stretches the limits of a slow growth and sometimes no growth Europe. Today, tensions rose some more as the British pound suffered its biggest single-day drop in almost 6 years.
It is important that the certainty of continued job creation, that this certainty can continue. I think it's also a message for Europe, and I do believe that were the UK to leave, the challenge for the European Union would be immense.
Financial insiders are pointing to business leaders. About half the CEOs of FTSE 100 companies, that's the UK's signature stock index, who are supporting Cameron. The top execs at Royal Dutch Shell and GlaxoSmithKline are among those expected to sign a letter saying a departure from the European Union could put Britain's economy at risk. Britain's political fissures echo the populist outcry here, and now it appears Wall Street is getting involved too. Goldman Sachs has reportedly given more than $700,000 to a group called Britain Stronger in Europe. Seema Modi for Nightly Business Report.
Still ahead, a company that's no stranger to controversy sees its stock price plunge today after a revised cancer warning from the CDC.
The number of Takata airbag recalls may quadruple. The Japanese manufacturer may be forced to recall an additional 70 to 90 million airbag inflators. As first reported by Reuters, roughly 29 million inflators have been recalled in the U.S., and safety regulators are investigating a wider potential safety hazard. New phones and gadgets and virtual reality, they dominate the start of the Mobile World Congress. This is the Mobile World's biggest event. But this year, there was a new issue dominating the conference, one that has grabbed the world's attention. John Fort reports tonight from Barcelona, Spain.
It's the tech world's biggest global stage where East and West come together to launch products and do deals. Mobile World Congress attracts 95,000 attendees and CEOs from around the world. Product-wise, the biggest news traditionally comes from smartphone makers like Samsung, which made a big splash with its Galaxy S7.
In a surprise twist, day one wasn't just about phones. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg actually joined Samsung on stage to talk about how these Galaxy phones are the best enabler of mobile virtual reality.
For the third year in a row, Zuckerberg came to Barcelona to drive a two-part agenda. For richer countries, he pushed the idea that virtual reality will create demand for faster fifth-generation wireless networks. For poorer countries, he drove home Facebook's commitment to providing internet access to communities that don't have it today.
One of the things that I've heard at MWC so far this year that I think has personally been a little bit disappointing is this idea that 4G was about giving people a good experience and 5G is about connecting things. What I personally hope is that we don't just do that, but we also kind of finish the job of making sure that everyone in the world gets internet access.
Zuckerberg also voiced support for Apple's fight against the FBI, which wants the company to crack the iPhone security system. He wasn't alone. Intel CEO also spoke out.
I think there's a balance here between those two. I'm absolutely not in favor and don't believe that we should do backdoors and be forced to do backdoors. But there probably is a way that working together with agencies, we can find a way to get them the data they need to really protect the citizens from the terrorists. And I think it's best when the engineers get together and actually solve the problem rather than the escalation.
The overall lesson from this year's Congress? In 2016, top-tier smartphones themselves are no longer the stars of the show. They've paved the way for new forms of virtual entertainment and new security headaches that have seized the world's attention. For Nightly Business Report, I'm John Fort in Barcelona.
Shares at flooring company Lumber Liquidators fall sharply, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said certain kinds of laminate flooring sold by Lumber Liquidators carries a 3 times higher risk of causing cancer than previously thought. The CDC had originally issued a report 2 weeks ago saying that the carcinogen formaldehyde found in the flooring posed a, quote, low risk of cancer, end quote. The CDC, though, said it used an incorrect value for ceiling height, leading to inaccurate results. Shares of Lumber Liquidators were down nearly 20% today to $11.40. Dean Foods saw its profits more than triple in its fourth quarter as the dairy producer benefited from lower raw milk costs. Revenue, however, lagged and missed analyst estimates. The food and beverage company also issued first quarter guidance that topped expectations. Nonetheless, shares were off nearly 8% to $18.88. And profit and revenue at pharmaceutical company Allergan beat estimates thanks in part to strong sales from its cosmetic drug Botox. The company is expected to complete a $160 billion merger with rival Pfizer by the end of the year. Allergan shares were up more than 3% today to $285.82.
Meantime, Cisco Systems says it will collaborate with Ericsson and Intel to create a new generation of routers. The companies will also work with Verizon to make that happen. The new router will allow for faster networking speeds. Cisco shares were up a fraction as a result today at $26.61. And shares of Valiant were getting hit in extended hours tonight after a Dow Jones report citing sources said the pharmaceutical company is expected to restate earnings following an internal review. That report also says that the restatement is likely over sales to its former drug distributor, Philidor. On Friday, shares fell by 10% following an analyst report slamming the company. And today, the company was off another 10% to $75.92, and that was before this report added to the free fall after hours.
Coming up, who's driving? A look at how the popular ride-hailing company Uber vets its drivers.
Uber is standing by its driver screening process tonight after one of its drivers admitted to a shooting spree over the weekend that killed 6 people in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And now users of the popular ride-hailing company want to know more about the company's background check process. Kate Rogers reports for us tonight.
While Kalamazoo shooting suspect Jason Dalton did not have a reported criminal history, the incident raises the question of just how safe passengers are when traveling with Uber. According to its website, Uber's screening does not include fingerprints, live scan, or checks with the DOJ or FBI databases. Instead, Uber drivers have to provide their license, vehicle documentation, and social security numbers for third-party background checks that comb through criminal records at county, state, and federal levels. In New York City, the Taxi and Limousine Commission conducts DMV and criminal background checks on drivers and always has, a TLC rep confirmed. This includes fingerprinting and drug testing. The fingerprinting issue has been a hot-button one across the country, with advocates, regulators, and unions saying there should be an even playing field between how establishment drivers are screened and how Uber, Lyft, and other sharing economy players screen their drivers.
Government-conducted criminal background checks that involve fingerprinting are the only way that you can truly see an individual's criminal history. Private background checks that use names cannot access an individual's full criminal history. In addition, people can sign up with fake names and then the background check is completely worthless.
Critics like Who's Driving You say foregoing fingerprinting and government background checks allows Uber to scale up more quickly and continue its expansion. Less than 2 weeks ago, Uber also agreed to pay $28.5 million to around 25 million riders in a class action settlement over the term Safe Ride fee. 2 lawsuits took issue with the company's claims its background checks are industry leading, and as part of the settlement, the fee would be renamed a booking fee. On a conference call this afternoon, Uber defended its current policy of not using fingerprint and police background checks and said that in light of this weekend's tragic events, it would not be changing its current policy of using third-party background checks in their place. Now, spokespeople for the company also said given the fact that the suspect did not have a criminal history, a background check would not have caught him.
Why not change the policy, though, if for no other reason, PR, to reassure people, you think?
You would think they may want to update it, but they were very adamant on this conference call this afternoon. They basically said fingerprinting can be discriminatory. When you cross-check through these police databases, they may have someone who was arrested for a crime but not necessarily charged, and that they're not always updated and current. And so they feel that by going through, the local, county, state, and federal levels on their own, and county in particular, they really said was very important to them, they feel that their background checks are more current and more up to date and more fair to the people that want to drive for them.
In India, they actually have a panic button on the app. Might they bring that to the app here in the United States, or no?
They said we have basically the ultimate panic button here in our 911 system, and that it's so vast and it works so quickly and it works so well that we don't need a panic button here. Instead, they encourage people who are unhappy with their service or might feel that they're in danger, rather on any trips, to just call 911. They feel that that's the better way to do it. So they said, there's been reports that they had tested this in Chicago. They shot those down on the conference call. They said this has not been tested here in the United States, and we do not plan to bring it at this time. So something to watch for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Kate Rogers, very much.
So will the tragic Uber shooting spree over the weekend change the way that people feel about the sharing economy? Let's turn to David Reese for his thoughts. He's professor of law at Brooklyn's Law School Center for Urban Business Entrepreneurs. Nice to have you here, David. Welcome back. I guess that is the question. Do you think it will change the way that people feel about the sharing economy, this case in particular?
I think we have to look at the short term and the long term. And I think in the short term, we're going to see that people are going to think twice about it. But in the long term, and as I think people think about their experience with sharing economy services and seeing how frequently terrible and tragic incidents like this occur, I think we're going to see a return to probably some growth in that area as people put this into perspective.
Are you surprised, as our reporter Kate Rogers was just pointing out here, that in their conference call just now, they seem to be digging in their heels on not changing their background check policies here? Why not, as I said, do that if only for PR reasons, just to reassure the public? I mean, this is a PR problem for them right now, isn't it?
It is, and I think they're probably in crisis response mode. They're probably not wanting to make big promises about big changes, to acknowledge that their business model is intrinsically flawed, and they're probably going to want to make changes on their own time.
There have been calls for more regulation of the sharing economy, specifically by those who are impacted in a negative way by the sharing economy. We have to put that out there. But do you think it opens the door a little bit wider for regulation?
I certainly do. I think there's been this attitude of it's better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission, and an incident like this and all of its tragic consequences raise the argument that maybe that's not the right way to go, that getting it right the first time is better than kind of seeing how it unfolds.
Growing pains in the sharing economy, or is this a real dent? What do you think?
I think it's growing pains. I think the sharing economy has been growing so rapidly with so many innovations, but I think it's here to stay. I think people are voting with their feet in terms of using these services, and governments trying to figure out how to adapt and how to regulate and what's the appropriate level of regulation.
Does it change, though, their liability? Do they have to change some of their policies, all of their policies, because there is a liability issue, and the weekend's horrible events really kind of point that out?
I think businesses react to lawsuits and to large judgments, and if courts and juries find that this behavior was negligent or reckless, they will get a clear message and they will change to adapt. I think that regulators are going to look carefully at them. So I think a lot of this is in flux, and I'm sure there's going to be changes. I don't know what they'll be.
Have you used Uber, and will you think twice now, if not?
I've used Lyft, and I would continue to do so.
All right, on that note, David, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. David Reese with Brooklyn Law School's Center for Urban Business Entrepreneurs.
Finally tonight, NASA has received a record number of applications for its next class of astronauts. Earlier this month, we reported on NASA's efforts to recruit and train future explorers in space. This time around, more than 18,000 people applied. That's roughly 3 times as many as the last go-around. But landing that job is going to be very difficult. NASA estimates that it will choose between 8 and 14 selected candidates from the most recent batch of applications. That's a very small
It sure is.
number there.
All right, before we go, another look at the rally on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed 228 points, 16,620. The Nasdaq rose 66, and the S&P 500 gained 27.
Thanks to that rally in oil today
Exactly.
again. Right.
Were you on the NASA list?
Not this time around.
Not this time,
Not
right?
this time, no.
He loves space.
I do.
All right, that's Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for watching.
I'm Bill Griffith. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.